Hey guys, Salvia3 here. You guys remember how a bit ago I sort of just went off the rails for my normal content to try making a uh you know video game essentially, and it really became quite chaotic after a while, and I barely assembled anything together. But I got 50 views for it, which made me very excited to continue working on it because I've been wanting to do this for a while now. Well, I took that information, of like 50 views and ran with it. And, spent another week, completely messing up my whole schedule to work on it for you all. And for me, mostly for me, I love the idea of game development. And recently I've picked up quite an interest in it. It's like, it just feels like one of those things I really like doing. But either way, I've continued working on it today, and now I'm gonna show you essentially what I've managed to build. It's in no way finished, but it's just a little bit more added to what we've been designing, essentially. So let's get right into it. Alright guys, so the first thing I did after, I got back to working was I wanted to make the trees look a bit more high definition. Because, essentially the trees I made were okay, but they didn't hold up to the image I was trying to create in the game. And you see the image I was trying to create in the game was something a bit more like this. Now, as you can tell, I did reuse a bit of the stuff I already made so it would look a bit better, and essentially made a more high definition version of the Lepiodon tree. I added very swampland like roots to it, which is actually not very accurate to the Lepiodon tree. In reality, it had much more, trunk like percussions with these roots going into the ground. But I sort of just thought I would roll with it and have a, sort of like an emergence with this tree compared to more of the swampland like biome trees that you would see from this era. Basically, this was just a series of, I started with making one branch right here, and then after I made that one branch, I added leaves to it, which are basically were little pine leaves, because during the early and late Carboniferous, a lot of trees were actually quite relative. So you would think because they were hardwood trees rather than pine tree like structures, they would have leaves. But interestingly enough, at this time, most of the plants were much more reliant on a different set of adaptations that all stranded from a more pine tree like idea, which is basically to make a bunch of little needles on one branch and slowly hold them together. So essentially what I did was work with that by making like more of a pine needle type thing going on, which would be then attached to a bunch of branches. And I basically just would duplicate this, and I duplicate the branch and made that larger. So then you just did that, and then I just attached it to the branches I already made to try to give a bit more similarities, because also I just did not want to use PNG, steel frame images for the branches and leaves, mostly because I just wanted it to look real. I found in a lot of video games recently, it's the small things that usually give me the most immersion in the game. So I really wanted to just give that whole three-dimensional aesthetic that a lot of games I've found recently aren't unable to give. They just like leave it very minimal, and I don't want to leave my games minimal, or any of the things in my video game minimal. Like, everything in the game, I want people to be able to like look over at it and just see the amount of detail, so it doesn't feel like it's just like a little bit of detail just to trick you into thinking this is very immersive. Like, it is going to be very immersive. I still haven't been able to like use texture paint to paint them, because every time I go online to look it up, it kind of just leaves me with a headache and a half trying to figure out how to transport it into Unity. So again, I just went with the classic, make one material for green and stuff. And the interesting thing is, it took a long time to make the tree, because the branches or whatever that I was using, I had to take and make all of these individual leaves. So when I was developing it, I would have to duplicate one thing over and over again, and then duplicate the leaves that attach to the branches over and over again. And it really was the very poor manner of development that took much longer. But I think it came out a lot better, and the detail is obviously there, which is exactly what I wanted out of it. Alright, so I knew that I was going to need to make a lot more trees because one of the coolest things I've found from the Carboniferous period that I've always found very interesting is that just its immaculate diversity of trees. And more specifically, most of them, what you wouldn't consider trees by this level, they're mostly just large, like, fern, like, you know, plants that, reproduced in that manner, so they wouldn't be classified at, but they look like trees, so I call them that. But, speaking of more, pine cone based trees that you would consider, you know, more along the softwood lineage were Cordet principalis trees, which were basically just a very specific breed of cordates that I looked up online. And essentially, they would look more like swampland trees, and the way they would actually be able to stay in water in damp, arid areas that were heavy in salt water was they would use the mangrove approach to collecting water, which was have a bunch of just these spread out little things that would sit in the water on top of the water and gather all the stuff from there so they wouldn't die out, which is quite intuitive. It was just an interesting thing. And then instead of having like very small appendages, they would have these giant, like, if you've ever seen like a, I don't really know what to compare it to. A lot of this stuff you really can't compare it to many trees you found today because all these died off due to massive forest fires and invasions at the time. Anyway, this was the sort of root system. You can see at this time it was a lot like the pine needles, except larger. Basically, they would have, like, again, a lot of these took very primitive and simple approaches to how their general anatomy was designed. Instead of having branching, like, multiple branching systems, they would usually just have one thing that branched off from the, like, trunk, and then it would have the leaves attached to it. So these would just be these giant long leaves that would branch off from the main root system. Alright guys, so now as you can see, this is what it looks like when I boot over in Unity. I found that I had much less issues just using the material method of adding texture onto the trees instead of painting it. For obvious reasons, I imagine, since it's just much easier for it to process. I did some more experimentation with a LOD group and actually took the time to understand exactly what this does outside of makes it actually show up on the tree assets when you're adding it to the terrain in the video game. Don't look at this. Don't focus on this. This doesn't. We'll get to that later. But anyway, as you can see, what it does now is basically the main issue I was running into is again adding this much, general like stuff to the tree, all this detail. Basically, when you have thousands of these lepiodon trees, like in the real Carboniferous, around you in the world, it kind of makes the game want to crash and burn, and when it's not doing that, you're getting like 3 frames per minute. So again, an interesting thing about the LOD group that I finally took the time to understand is one of the best things about what I can do with this now is I can enhance like a rendering system. Basically, at this point, you're up close because there's not as many trees around your sprite at this time. You can look at a few trees at one time that are at this high definition consistency, and it won't be that bad. But using a LOD group system, what you can do is basically, as you get farther away from certain trees in the area, you'll get further back, you'll be walking away from it, and you'll allow the, processor to relax by essentially converting it back to this after you get to a certain extent. And then, this LOD 1 will basically continue, so you'll still be able to look like this like vast forest in the background, and it won't lose the immersion of the tree instantly just leaving. I also use this for my other sprite, as you can see. I took more, this is basically, more of a, I imagine that there really isn't much evidence for this because we're using fossils to figure out how, detailed they are, or what, we don't know what colors any of them are. But I imagine because it's more around, the conifer base, cordates, conifer is sort of not the same thing, but you know what I mean. It's sort of the same thing. That's the trees. Now, let's move on to our first NPC. Alright guys, now allow me to introduce you to Ariops. I think I pronounced it right. Anyway, one of my favorite things about the Carboniferous period that I never see many people discussing a lot is they'll always say, oh, it was the age of, trees, or the age of, bugs, or insects. But I don't know why no one brings up the crazy giant, colossal amphibians that we had this time, like such as, per se, Ariops. Essentially, this was basically just a giant behemoth of a mammal, not a mammal, a amphibian that would roam, would roam the waters and the swamplands of, the eastern part of Pangaea, just, attacking smaller amphibians as well as other insects. And this is really not a good example. It had these giant eyes. I might put up a picture of something while editing to show you, but basically this is what I came up with for now. I am still I don't have as much experience like making, NPC based assets, so this is a bit new to me. Essentially, in Blender, there's a very interesting system of animation I found. Alright, so basically after I finished the animation, I made an armature of Ariops, which came out looking a bit funny, but we'll get back to that. Anyway, after this, now you have your armature. You essentially just start moving the armature around. So I started with one frame, and then I got to another frame, and then I got to another frame. Like, so basically moving this way, normal position, moving this way, and then moving this way while walking. So essentially what I could do now, essentially what you do is you get like at least like a good few frames of the how you want the animation to be in the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then you begin to string it out. And then Blender basically renders in smaller proportions every time and continues stringing it out every time, so it has it multiplies by a factor of 30%. And after a while you get this. Granted, this still looks very primitive, and I could do some more work to make sure it functions a bit better. But for now, that's what Ariops's animation frame image is gonna be. All right, guys. So this is my NPC code. Now, one of the biggest issues I ran into was deciding to actually write this code before developing the NPC asset and animation. The first thing I found that I was running in with myself was forgetting to set public floats, or basically set the names of the variables, because a lot of times a lot of the issues with commanding it after void start was initializing different processes that required you to name them. So essentially you would say, okay, go execute this, so execute transform position. Like, for some reason with the code, even if you have like the you've defined what this means. So in this case, transform position is the same thing as move towards the target position. So move, go to this place. You have it defined, but for some reason it still has no idea what that is. So you have to go over here. So then you basically you turn this variable or this command into a public float, but you set the private thing right here. So it explains to it exactly that it basically tells it that this is a valid variable that I can use. Basically, these are the values that it starts out with to the extensions that it can travel. Because what I want to do is basically be intelligent enough to walk around the game, but look natural, right? I want to go to different positions in the map. Before I can make it so it interacts with other NPCs, I just want it to be able to walk around naturally around the map. And I also have trying to find a way to control exactly where it goes so it's more immersive. Alright guys, so now as you can see, this is our NPC. It doesn't really look like it's moving very much, but that's just because the range I've set it at, prohibits it to a very small boxed in area or percentage. The idea of it is basically every time it transfers to another location, the range that it can have provided resets. So it basically changes depending on it. Basically, if it goes one place, then the range that I can use is altered to a slightly different one. Now, here's the thing. You know that animation that I made? Well, when I added it to this manner, it looks like this. Yeah, yeah. It'd be a little bit, it having a little trouble, as you can see here. It looks like, Eurypterus over here is just doing a bit of breakdancing, you see. And I really have not been able to figure out exactly why this is. I don't know. I think it's because I'm adding it directly to the mesh collider. I'm trying to find a way to get to point to simply point the asset in the direction of the sprite, so, it looks accurate. But to do that, I have to somehow, pair it with the, NPC's mesh collider, which is that UV sphere that I made to, as a basic, node in to work with the physics of Unity's engine. Alright guys, so this is the first weapon I've developed. I haven't even like added any sort of painting to this because I forgot to strip it down to different levels in order to, properly transport the, colors into Unity. But this is the first like assault rifle concept. I was inspired by mostly by the older black powder rifles that you'd see, which weren't really common in this era, sadly. But, took that and then just combined it with a couple other weapons. So this was the concept art. This was why I developed. I was so basically, as you can see, it's a black powder rifle, and then after the black powder rifle, it kind of just merges into like a fully automatic. I think I got this off of a 50 caliber, which I got this idea because like basically this was a 50 caliber black powder ball, and this is a 50 caliber automatic. It looks kind of stupid, and the whole idea of it, on an actual weapon engineering level sounds so freaking stupid. But that's okay. This is a video game. I don't gotta worry about accuracy. All right, guys. So here is the general armature that I attempted to make for basically the player and the NPCs. Yes, it's hard to believe, but I did make this. I wish I could prove it to you, but I did spend like a long time just making this like from scratch. But the issue I think I ran the most with was one, being stupid and not rendering each part of it out as one, piece, and two, having no proper idea how on earth to weight paint. And weight paint, this is, if you want to know what weight painting is, here, I will show you. It's a bit hard to explain. So as you can see here, this is weight painting. Basically, the like hot, like the cooler temperatures or colors are essentially the points where there is no weight, which means they're the most flexible object parts of the, mesh in corresponds to the armature. So the blue parts are where you want your armature limbs to bend. And when you're moving the different posing positions, and the red is like the parts that don't move at all, so all those are the parts in between. Because I did not sector off each piece as its own mesh asset, they all work as if they're like they're this one piece, which is really not good if you're trying to make limbs move in correspondence with a torso that doesn't move, which when you go to animate it, you see, when you go back to the armature to animate it, you get this. Yeah. This, my dude's looking pretty rough over here. And this is mostly due to, again, if we go back to the, circle asset in this mode, that's because these are the only parts that are able to move, while these are the parts that are staying steadfast. The reason, again, you want these arms and stuff to have different, variations and shades, is if I properly did it, you would need all these things to have different proportions and weight. But because they're all working as one object, it's acting like, that. And, yeah, it looks horrible, and it was really... Oh gosh, just sad that I forgot about that main issue. Either way, this is gonna be the general character. I think now that I know exactly what I did wrong, I think, give me a few more weeks or so and I'll be able to fix it. I think I haven't added any of the actual, like, details to it, but this is gonna be the general thing that all of them are gonna use, because each faction, you can choose so many different factions that I'm gonna create, depending on what exactly you want to do in the game. There are going to be a bunch of different factions, people, different, like, classes you can upgrade into. I might put a few of them on screen, or I might not. I probably will, because I've already written out a bunch of them, and I have so many more, like, they're in here that I haven't gotten out on paper, to like create, but yeah, but there's gonna be like a bunch of them depending on what you want to do in the game. All right, guys, so welcome to the map. This is essentially the map I made. A lot of it is just like it really doesn't have much good design, honestly. Because I really was just adding different objects together. I wanted like a bunch of islands, and then I wanted a bunch of like larger islands. I didn't really know what to draw, so I just added a bunch of random stuff onto it. I guess without further ado, I'll show the like base design of, at ground level of the game now. Alright guys, this is the main part of the game. Also this is the NPC. I haven't added the animation to him because as you know it's pretty sad, but basically this is gonna be like the small like fauna that you're gonna find in the game. Imagine this is like a small like or a giant like alligator sized amphibian that's just walking across while you're at war. You're just gonna see these like, amphibians and bugs that are around you. This is the main part of the forest. I probably should have showed this last, but as you can see the lepiodon trees, they are like kind of like the more you look at them, the more my computer starts to scream at me. But as you can see in the distance, there are also lots of them in the distance as well. And then I still haven't revised the like calamites, which I do want to at some point. And the reeds, I don't know why I made the reeds so tall. I probably need to alter the proportions of the character. But yeah, the reeds. And then if you go further out over here, if I can just get to a part of the game that's like, this is gonna be the this is the more swampland biomes, which again I think I could have done a bit better, but let's try getting over to them. Alright, so now that we're over at one of the smaller islands, this is gonna be like see, that's sort of the idea of the trees. Sadly, you can't barely see the trunks due to the reeds, but that's how they're gonna look like in the game. And, all these small islands, again, you can basically decide if you want to just go really hyper dominant in the game and take over a bunch of islands, or if you just want to like stay and set up a base on one of them to defend, and you can make your own trench lines in it to defend it. Because at the beginning of the game, everyone's gonna be setting up their bases, and for like everything incoming, and then after that point, that's when people will likely start, coming in and attacking you. So along these, you'll be in your trench or something, and then all of a sudden, like, a bunch of people will, like, run up onto the shores and start attacking you, and you'll basically just be attacking them. Or vice versa, you can attack other people, but again, in this part of the area, there's gonna be, like, a bunch of different traps, like, it's like stick traps, where, like, one of the trees, you can people take the calamites, put, like, sharpen the ends of them and put them on ties for like you know and like that, or like hole traps. You can also dig like like you can make holes in the ground for that sort of matter, and like it'll be terrifying and to play the game. Jump scares, a lot of jumps, hopefully just not really jump scares, but a lot of like traps you didn't expect to like die from in the game. And granted, you can respawn. I think I'm gonna make it so like if you die and if your team takes over the objective, you'll be able to respawn. But outside that, you'll have to like restart the game in another server to continue or something, or start back at a certain point in the like map. Because it's gonna be like a large game. It's not just gonna be like a small game. It's like a giant like system that's gonna carry out over like the spread of like like hours on end or something. Or you can choose a quicker game. But yeah, I only developed one side of this district because I'm still trying to like get all the proportions properly added, and it takes a lot to do this. And I guess I'll go back to the map to show you exactly why. All right, so as you can see, with all the trees, right? In order to get a map this size while using the terrain, I had to do something really, really stupid that I regret moving forward, which was essentially taking one square unit of terrain, and then essentially after I get rid of the water, I had to take every single part of the terrain and develop it individually, which meant that yeah, uh, uh essentially each of these are one square unit of terrain that you can add to the game, and that's how it's so vast. The issue is this is it takes a lot longer to like add trees and stuff to it and get all the textures loaded in. So I had to go around every one that I wanted this color. I had to go around and add the colors in. But also, I think this gives a lot more like it'll be a lot easier. It'll not, or it might not be a lot easier, but functionally it might be a bit easier. There's also gonna be a mountain. I haven't added much of the terrain like height proportions to the game yet because I still need to develop the mountains that'll be right through here. That you'll see in my map if I put that back on up on screen for a few minutes. Either way, and also the trench lines. I haven't added the trench lines yet either, which I really haven't added a lot to the game yet. But you see, this is gonna be the trench lines, I think. If I can just pull them up right quick to show you. Yeah, I haven't figured out. I want to find a way to take the trench lines and get them to like collide through the terrain, so that like I can design it and I won't have to worry about the terrain covering up the center of the trench lines and like find a way to make because they're gonna be like under the ground a bit. So I need to find a way to get them to render through the ground and basically hide the ground that they're under. I don't know how to explain it better, but yeah, it's the idea of it. It's very, very, very primitive in development now, but I really think it could it'll look good in another 5 or 7 years of production. It's gonna have slow progress, like because of school and uh my other attention deficit reasons that are mostly me problems. But yeah, I think it looks cool. I put some more time into it, and I really like how it's starting to come into development. I might redesign these islands because they look kind of silly, as you can see. They just like I don't know, man. Either way, I think they're okay, but they don't exactly capture the vision I was going for. Either way, I appreciate if you've been watching this. I appreciate you watching this and just going through this, absolute, crazy, you know, you know, I don't really know what to call this. I would say dream, like, dream that it's, never mind. Just thank you for watching. If you tell me what else, what you guys think of it. If you don't, and that's if you don't, and you hate the whole idea, that's all right too. I appreciate anything, to comment on. It's I'll probably not be able to continue add any more updates to this since school is starting back, and it takes a whole chunk out of my time and energy. But once summer kicks off again, I'm gonna put more work into this. I think I'm gonna put more work into this, in my spare time when I'm not working on stuff for school. And yeah, I think it's coming very very well. I'm not very good at development, but as you see, I'm trying my best to practice coding. Again, I'm relying on a lot of AI, but I'm trying to let the AI teach me rather than just letting it write everything because it feels so disgusting just telling it to just write this thing for me. I've been, but I'm trying to understand why it does so I can do it myself. I still feel bad about it because I'm letting you guys down. I wanted to fully just code it all myself, but I'm still teaching. I'm still learning. But by the time like I get better, I'm just gonna do it all myself. I'm slowly like starting to understand how it all works together. It's just really hard. Not really hard, but for my stupid brain, it's really hard. It's probably very simple, but either way, I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.